Okay, so we are working on electronic aids to daily living. And everybody can see the slide?
Looks good.
All righty, let's go. Okay, so we're going to look at the definition of electronic aids for daily living, identify functional applications of specific devices, distinguish between transmission methods of EIDLs. So EIDLs, or electronic aids to daily living, provide independent control of electronic devices within the environment. Okay, so the official definition is any electronic technology used for specific purpose of providing independent operation of appliances. Now, for those of you who have been in the field for a while, EIDLs used to be called ECUs or ECSs. So they used to be environmental control units or environmental control systems. And it was recently changed to EIDLs, electronic aids for daily living, which this actually this change is pretty recent because as it says on the slide there, the ECU technically refers to HVAC systems, environmental control units, so what we have in our houses to operate our heating and our air conditioning. So that's one reason changing it has helped. But EIDLs are tools and strategies that enhance a person's ability to function in different environments. This EIDL is very recently adopted terminology, so much so that in the Fundamentals of Assistive Technology Manual, it still refers to the technology as in environmental control systems. Okay? And the area of technology has also had a poor track record getting funded. So they're hoping with the new name, it more accurately describes the devices and hopefully will improve reimbursement. So with electronic aids to daily living, we are all using them. Can you think of something that you use probably on a pretty daily basis or at least weekly basis, a couple times a week, to control something in your environment? Yes, a remote control, Beth. You can use a phone, yeah, Amazon Alexa, right? I like that one, remote car starter for cold mornings like today. Okay, so we are all using EIDLs in our everyday life. Okay, so what all can we control with these devices? So obviously, television, so and audio visual equipment, so radios with remote controls, powered beds. We can operate doors, security cameras, even telephones, our lights, right? We tell Alexa to maybe turn things on and off for us. And we can actually also control our heating and air conditioning, okay? And our clients, how do we access, right, the EIDLs? So obviously we have remote controls that would be a direct selection, right? So our remote controls, direct selection, we're operating the numbers and the arrows, right, to operate the TV, so that's direct. You can use a switch, and it can be a single switch. We can use a device where it allows for scanning. We can use switch arrays. We can use voice activated, think about like the Alexa, that's voice activation. We can actually operate them through the computer or a lot of the communication devices that we talked about, have that built-in environmental control. And then we can also interface with them through our smartphones with all the different apps that are available out there now. I just want to check, I'm hearing some feedback. So I'm thinking somebody's not muted. So if you could just make sure that you are muted, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, so who all can benefit from using an EIDL? Well, obviously everybody, right? Who?
Right, because I knew that it would be an upcharge for the pursuit and there
Okay,
wasn't an option
Scott,
for
can
it.
you please go ahead and mute? Okay. So we can all benefit, from using EIDLs. Um, all ages, for the most part. A lot of children can use EIDLs at a very basic level to control toys, to be active in play. And any client who can independently control devices in their environment, right, who can't independently control them because of their disability, can benefit from using an EIDL. So where can they be used? Well, obviously the home, right? So again, we talked about the TV. We can operate stereos, beds, which are really nice. Your thermostats to control the heating and the air conditioning, security cameras at work. You can control lights and doors. You can do different things at the school level. So lots of different switch activated toys. You can also do slide projectors and fish feeders, which are pretty cool. And then the community, and this is something that where we are also using EIDLs is in the community. So door openers, elevators, anything that has, some kind of button, which is also a switch to operate. So next we're going to talk about the evaluation or the assessment and some different components. So what we're looking at, their goals, their needs, physical, psychosocial, and cognitive abilities. So when we're assessing for an EIDL, you need to determine the consumer's needs, their potential access methods, right? So is it going to be direct select, going to be a switch, it's going to be voice activation, the system feedback, so that they know it's being activated. Does it integrate with other equipment? And we also need to look at funding concerns because some of these, obviously, we look at, some getting reimbursement is difficult with EIDLs, and some of the systems can be quite expensive. But with all the mainstream things coming out like Alexa's and the Google Home, these systems, those types of things are, very cost effective at this point. So the consumer's major physical and motor abilities that need to be considered include the position for use, right? Does it need to be used from a wheelchair, from a bed, right? The control site or the best body part to control the device is important. And the consumer's strength, their range of motion, their endurance, their coordination, and their muscle tone all need to be looked at. Expandable, George, would be a system. So thinking about like your computer, can you, or your phone, can you add additional options or features to it? So being able to expand the features of that system so that we can add more capabilities to it. That's what the expandable is on the slide there. And looking at the consumer's, the person's physical and motor abilities, who we should be working with in order to evaluate those needs? Which therapists do you think need to be involved in that portion of the assessment? And a PT, yep, and an OT, exactly. Those are the two main ones that we need to be involved in that portion. The consumer's psychosocial abilities, we need to evaluate. When we do the evaluation, we should be looking at things like their motivation to use the technology, their fears and frustration levels towards electronic devices, right? Sometimes that's age dependent, and their need for independence versus their need for attention. Another psychosocial factor is the caregiver's opinion on the value of that system, right? Is the setup going to be too time consuming? Is it too complicated? Do they also understand that, that device? And an evaluation of their cognitive ability should also be done, and this should include their ability to understand and follow instructions, sequencing, long and short-term memory, association skills, literacy skills, as well as their attention span. And when we look at perception, this is another area that we need to consider, such as their visual acuity, spatial relations, right? Lateral neglect, figure ground, right? So all of those visual things, motor planning, auditory or visual feedback requirements that they're going to be needing. We also need to be looking at the environment, right? So we talked about a couple weeks ago, and we talked about the HAT model. One of the components of that is the context or the environment, and that's very, very important. So after we look at their abilities, their goals, their tasks, we've looked at present and possible future environments. We need to evaluate all of the possible environments, including the home, the buildings, architectural barriers, the wiring that's within these buildings, and also um, weather conditions in these different areas. All right, so we have a question here. Let's see here. Single switch is commonly used with indirect selection during scanning of mechanical switches, but is the single switch sometimes programmed as direct selection? If it's still going to be probably considered indirect. However, if you have a adapted remote like they do have, where you have a switch that you hit that is directly plugged into the remote that operates volume or channel, I guess you could kind of consider that more as direct. But in that situation, you're going to have a switch array. So you're going to have multiple switches to activate all of those different functions. Um, but best case scenario, just common thing to think about if you're using a switch, it's just always going to be indirect selection. Some other factors that we need to consider are all computer-driven EADLs should be plugged into surge protectors with battery backup. So that's something we need to consider for the environment. Voice activated ones may not be practical for noisy locations, such as an office or a classroom. And then liquid crystal displays, which we don't see very often anymore, are difficult to read in bright sunlight. But again, we don't see these very often anymore, so that's a good thing. And then any possible interference with the EADLs, so their transmission methods, needs to be anticipated. So if we think about radio frequency or infrared, so think about your remote control for your TV. If it's not pointed directly at the TV, it's not going to necessarily work. If you're trying to use the remote control from a different room, it's not going to work, right? Because it has to have that direct line for that infrared to work. The client and the caregiver must assist with environmental evaluation through interviews, pictures, diagrams, or home videos. We need to know, like, for example, their home or their work environment, what it looks like. Sometimes you can do a home visit, which really helps. And a rehabilitation team member should definitely try to do that site visit or that home or workplace visit because it's very, very helpful. Because even though you're doing interview questions and maybe they're sending a video or they're, drawing a diagram for you, unless you're there in person, they're going to miss things that you need information on. All right, so we can classify our EADLs into general and specific. And within general, we have limited output and multiple output. So let's talk a little bit about that. So for limited output EADLs, there's a wide variety of applications for control devices, whether it's in the home, the school, the office, or community environments. And the first application is the entry-level system, which is typically used to just control one application, okay, or one appliance. And entry-level systems are designed for limited device control and are generally inexpensive. These systems typically control any battery operated, such as a toy or electrical device, which is like on and off only. And the user can generally operate the device directly in latch or timed mode. Okay, so direct control requires sustained switch contact. So I need to be holding down the switch to keep the device on. Latched control requires one switch activation for on, and then another switch activation to turn it off. And then time control turns the device on for an for a specified amount of time. These systems are great for kids or for adults with limited cognitive skills, such as an adult with a developmental disability, for clients who may be intimidated by more sophisticated systems, or for someone who requires limited device control. So these are two limited output EADLs. So the picture on the left shows a device that facilitates direct, latched, or timed control of a battery operated device. And the picture on the right shows a control unit used with electrical games and appliances. You can see it has a hair dryer plugged into it with a ball. So when it's activated, the hair dryer turns on and the ball is blown down the table. So with these, direct control keeps the appliance or game on while the switch is activated. The latch control uses one activation of a switch to turn the device on and another to turn it off. And then you have your timed again, which keeps it on for a set period of time. Okay. Okay, so for limited output EADLs, what type of skills do you think they're good for teaching? Cause and effect, Lee. Absolutely. Cause and effect. Remember that answer for later. There's a little hint for you. Next, we have multiple output, and these control more than one device. All right, so with limited output, it's one device at a time. For the most part with those, some of them, they allow you to do maybe two at a time now. But they also have multiple control interfaces and access options. So user interfaces for these types of EADLs include keyboards or direct selection devices, single switches, switch arrays, even voice recognition. You can use augmentative communication devices, a power wheelchair controller, or even a computer. And many systems only provide one or two access methods each. And for this reason, access methods can limit your choice of systems. So keep in mind that the access method may need to be used from a wheelchair and from bed. So you may need to have multiple access methods, and then switch access can change between these positions as well as voice quality. So we have multiple outputs, so we can operate more than one device with these. So direct access is usually the least expensive and most readily available. And in this slide, we can see where we have the keyboard and direct connection to a device, and we're going to talk about these types of devices. And this is like an older X10 module. They're both X10 modules, but it's direct. Very, very simple, just a couple buttons on there. But this is another one. The remote control, it has a keyboard on it, right? And it's a direct user interface. Okay. This one then is a single switch or switch array. And you can use one or two switches, or sometimes, depending on the remote, you can use multiple switches. And with a single switch system, scanning is generally required. So it's going to have to scan between all of these different choices. And then it can also have auditory scanning, where it speaks the choices, and the auditory scanning can be very helpful for people with visual and or cognitive impairments. And look at all these new ones, right? Speech recognition, Olga, is direct access. Speech is always going to be direct access. So then with these newer systems, speech can be a great access method from a variety of positions if the quality of the person's speech remains consistent, right? They don't have to read anything. They don't have to access a switch. And most systems also have feedback, so speech feedback as well. And some systems also have switch access available, which is a nice backup if their voice fails for any reason, maybe they have a cold or they lost their voice, so that's nice to have a backup in all of these things. Okay, so Google Home, Amazon Alexa, all these new devices out there are great for the if they can use speech recognition. And then you have computer EADLs, which are typically interfaced through the computer. Most are designed for the general public, and the access method is whatever you choose as the access method for the computer. So you can have direct using a keyboard and a mouse. You can have switches, and it will scan through the options. You can use voice with like Dragon. And there are a variety of software packages that turn on different operating system platforms, that run on different operating platforms, and they look at software being marketed to the general public. Okay, so this one out here is multimedia. The picture here is just Multimedia Max, which is a really cool program, and you can do, the amount of things that you can do with this is incredible. I actually worked with a gentleman down when I actually lived in Pensacola for a little while, and he had cerebral palsy. He was in a wheelchair. His sister also had cerebral palsy, so his mom was, dealing with two kids in the house with cerebral palsy. Actually, I shouldn't say kids; they were both adults. But he was gifted this. This was donated. This whole system was donated to him by a wealthy community member, and I got to go in and help him and train him. And they actually had a camera set up at the front door. They had an automatic door opener so he could be back in his bedroom. He would ring the doorbell. He would look in the camera on the computer and be able to open the door so that you could come in. He can control things in his bedroom, in the living room, in the hallway. He could control the thermostat, his bed. He could go online, do shopping, and he did it all with his voice. And back then it was Dragon Dictate. And because he had cerebral palsy, his speech wasn't all that clear, but because he used Dragon Dictate, which was discrete and not continuous voice recognition, we were able to program the device to recognize his voice. So it was a pretty cool setup. So in earlier AAC devices included switch outputs, such as that old serial and ASCII output that could be used to operate an EADL system. Nowadays, however, they include infrared output, and the infrared can be set up to use the codes that you use with your AV equipment, or they can often transmit serial codes to operate a computer or any other device that accepts that type of input. So for example, it's infrared, so you can use it as a universal remote to operate your TV, for example. So it's pretty neat that they have all that built into them. And many of the devices and strategies used for home automation are used as cannot say that tonight, EADLs are part of the EADL system. And here's just a couple of great home automation options that are available to all of us, to the general public, which is really nice, which means the cost is coming down. So interfacing a system to a power wheelchair. This will allow the client to access the EIDL using the driving access method, so they can use their joystick, for example, to operate an EIDL. It also allows for switch output. It does require an interface component and typically a cable. However, there are newer power wheelchair electronics that send the infrared signals. There are also devices that are Bluetooth that work with a power wheelchair. And this is just an example of one particular interface by Invacare. And so it's common. So this is just, it provides the connection, and then it provides a cabled connection. However, because the new power wheelchairs are capable of sending infrared or even Bluetooth signals now, They can control computers and smartphones and tablets, all kinds of cool things. So like the BJoy Ring is another system that uses a simple ring device that is mounted on the joystick, and that can be wired or Bluetooth. So pretty neat devices that are out there nowadays. And then we get to specific function EIDLs. So we have door openers. I think these are in a weird order, but we have door openers, adaptive phones, and page turners. So first is adapted phones, and these are used for communication. They can be extremely important for both verbal and nonverbal users. They can provide independently operated tools in an emergency to get assistance from someone in another room, to use the phone for a variety of purposes, and to take notes with a tape recorder even. When a person is left unattended, they must have the ability to call out or alert someone in an emergency. And even with an attendant, it's important. So for example, the person with disability may need to call for help if the attendant needs assistance. So, sometimes they may get injured. The client may need to alert caretakers in the night, right, during the night as well. So this application is extremely important to consider, not only to facilitate the independence, but also privacy. And these tools give someone the opportunity to be by themselves for a period of time, but still have a method to reach someone when needed. So what we see here is a device that is used to operate all the functions on the phone with a single switch. Okay, it's used to activate and deactivate the phone, dial stored phone numbers, and dial one number at a time for a new phone number that has not been stored in a device. And it can also store an introductory message for answering the phone if needed. And we have door openers. And this is a good one for security, for independence, all right? There are a variety of devices that facilitate opening and closing doors, locking and unlocking them, as well as providing surveillance at the door before letting someone in. And anyone left alone also needs a means of exiting the residence in an emergency, right? They may need to call 911, but then they need to get out of the house. And this requires the client to be able to independently um, be mobile. So whether it's in a power chair or a manual chair, be able to exit the door, be able to open the door, and then be able to exit with an accessible ramp or something to that nature. This particular picture shows an add-on door opener that's controlled with a switch, either carried by the wheelchair user or mounted on the wall within the reach of the wheelchair user. And because of ADA, we have these door openers built into majority of our community buildings, which is nice. But these are used more for home for these add-ons. Another example would be page turners as a specific output. So for users who have a physical impairment where they cannot hold the book or turn the pages, they can use these automatic page turners, and they use them with a switch typically. And you can also use, well, the newer fangled ones, right? Audiobooks, MP3 players, computers, and tablets. We can do all of that stuff and just have the audiobooks instead of a page turner. But for someone who still wants to read, this is a good option. They're just very expensive, and they tend to break down a lot. They don't work as well as we would like for them to work, but that's just an example to give you for a specific output. Okay, so next we're going to talk about modes of transmission, right? So most EIDLs are remote or portable, but some still use direct connection or are hardwired. Okay. So when wire connections are being used, they are not portable, or they need to be mounted depending on the size of the box and the cabling system. And most connections that are still wired nowadays are much smaller and easier to mount. So that's nice. But with all the new Bluetooth and everything else out there, this is becoming a thing of the past with all of the wiring. However, we still have systems that are hardwired into the actual house wiring. So that's something else to think about. So when we think about a remote, right? So this is a wireless, right? It does require a transmitter and a receiver, or a transceiver. So the remote is the transmitter and the TV or whatever it's operating is the receiver end of it. They are typically trainable, they're programmable, they're portable, and they can use different types of technology. So you can have radio frequency, infrared or IR, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So just real quick, radio frequency. Where in your house do you use radio frequency typically to operate something with a remote? Does anybody know? Garage door opener. There we go. Beth is right. Garage door opener is radio frequency. Infrared or IR is going to be your what? What do you use with your infrared? TV remote? Yep. That's where we also have radios, our DVD players, right? Wi-Fi, right? We can also have Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi does have a longer range, wireless signal. And then you have Bluetooth, but Bluetooth is a shorter range wireless signal. It's typically maxes out at about 30 feet. Okay, so other types of module control. We have X10, Insteon, and Z-Wave or Zigbee. And Zigbee is a short range. So compared to like the Wi-Fi or the Bluetooth, it's about 33 feet. So it's a little bit longer than the Bluetooth, but not much. So we're going to talk about these in a little more detail, but X10 uses existing house wiring, so it gets plugged in. All right, it's a little box that gets plugged in. I'll be showing you some examples of that. The remote uses radio frequency or infrared, and it can be interfaced with new wireless technologies. And then you have Insteon, and it uses the power line and radio frequency, so that the house wiring, and they're more reliable than X10, and they control more devices. So it's a newer. They're Insteon and Z-Wave are newer versions, and then Z-Wave is a single band radio frequency wireless network. So these technologies can control your lights in your house, simple appliances such as a fan, thermostats that have been set up to work with these types of systems, window air conditioning units because they get plugged into the wall, electrical hospital beds, and power door openers. Okay, so for X10, it uses the house wiring and a control box to activate simple plug-in appliances. Each X10 has a code that is set, which is matched to the remote. And multiple devices can be controlled, each with its own code. So you can have lights and fans and other simple on and off appliances. X10 stopped making their IR-X10 receiver, and this was the only way to control X10 modules from EIDLs and speech generating devices that only send IR controls. But Insteon and Zigbee have taken over that gap. So Insteon is a home automation technology for light switches, lights, thermostats, leak sensors, remote controls, motion sensors, and other electrically powered devices. It works through your house wiring, radio frequency, or both. And it uses what's called a dual mesh network, and that combines wireless radio frequency and a building's existing electrical wiring. And typically they are used as backups to each other. So if something happens with the connection with the house wiring, then the radio frequency works, or we're using radio frequency, and if that fails, then the house wiring will take over. Okay. Okay. So okay. Insteon plug-in modules let you add remote control to plug-in appliances. Remote control options let you control connected lamps and appliances from any wall switch, keypad, sensor, or even a smartphone when used with a hub. And the Insteon is plugged into the wall and the light or appliance is plugged into the Insteon plug-in. So just like an X10, you have to plug the device into that box. And different plug-in modules are available to control various appliances inside or outside the home. So here you can see there's one for appliances, lamps, thermostats, as well as ceiling lights. Then we have Z-Wave, and this is a wireless communication protocol. It's used primarily for home automation. It's a mesh network using low energy waves to communicate from appliance to appliance, allowing for wireless control of residential appliances and other devices, such as lighting control or security systems, thermostats, windows, locks, swimming pools, and garage door openers. Okay. And a Z-Wave system can be controlled through the internet from a smartphone, a tablet, or a computer, and locally through a smart speaker, a wireless key fob, or even a wall-mounted panel. So let's talk a little bit about these different systems. So with infrared. Infrared transmission is a signal sent by an infrared light emitting diode or LED or laser diodes, right? A photoreceptor detects and captures the light pulses and translates information. The frequency range is below the visible light spectrum. Okay? Infrared is a directional beam, so it requires line of sight and is useful only with a short range. Aldridge, that I do not know. I do not know if these waves can cause cancer. That is something definitely out of my area of expertise on that one. Light and weather can also affect transmission of infrared. Data transmission rate is slower than with a wired transmission. It has low power requirements, has low circuitry costs. It's simple. It's very simple circuitry, higher security than other remote transmission methods. It's portable and has a high noise immunity, which means it's less likely to have interference from signals from other devices. Infrared is heavily used in mainstream appliances, including TVs, VCRs, and other audiovisual components. This is, what your typical TV remote or DVD player remote is infrared. Then we have radio frequency. Radio frequency or RF transmission is in a specific frequency range. It does not require line of sight. It can penetrate solids and pass through walls. Okay. It has long range, is not light or weather sensitive, especially if you think about your garage door opener. If it was light or weather sensitive, we'd be in trouble. There is a problem with interference in the communication devices using the same frequencies, including wireless phones, garage door openers, scanners, wrist radios, and personal locators, right? And that can interfere with transmissions. Typically, how this is overcome is by reducing the distance between the transmitter and the receivers and by having several transmission channels available so we can switch between channels to find the strongest signal. Because can you imagine if one of your neighbors had the same radio frequency set up for the garage door opener? So every time they open and close theirs, it opened and closed yours. That would be bad. So which leads to the lack of security and that it is easy to eavesdrop on a transmission since signals are spread out in space rather than confined to a wire or beam of light. They do cost more than infrared. The FCC actually the licenses are required for some of the radio frequency products, and transmission rate is slower than for wired and infrared transmission. All right, so our IR remote controls, okay? We can use tablets and smartphones, okay? There are apps available that can control specific TVs and cable boxes. You can have external hardware put in place in order to use these as an infrared signal. So if you think about like the cable box control, right, through a wireless network, Does, however, require reading. You need to have good vision. You need to have precise control to use these remote controls. So here's just an example of using a tablet to access to this. You can see cable options for shows. Everyone who has a cable service has this type of control. And with the built-in switch scanning and now mouse control on smart devices, it's now more accessible to individuals with disabilities. And a lot of EIDLs follow universal design principles with all the home automation options available through like Google Home and Amazon Alexa. So we have so many more options out there for us today. So, and there are also more and more apps available, with more coming regularly to control home appliances, even when you're not home, which is pretty cool. These are just a few examples of systems that use an app but need a controller and a module to actually use them. So for example, the Inseon Hub, Nest is another one, good. Aldridge. Yeah, there's a lot of different options out there now. It's kind of ridiculous how many we have available to us now. Well, we don't necessarily need all these expensive, fancy EIDLs when they're now becoming so universal for all of our homes. So then we need to think about some safety. So we need to make sure that the user understands the operation of these devices and the modes that they have available to them, their limits to make sure we prevent injury. So thinking about, power bed control, equipment power ratings, especially if we're looking at, house wiring, and that also goes with power outlet multiplication. So, what kind of load are we putting on the house wiring? If the client has access to a door opener, are they safe outside alone? If they have access to a phone, will they use it responsibly? Okay, and making sure that they're not, calling 911 when they don't need to be. Or like when I used to do, used to work as an independent living coach back in the day, and one of my clients decided to call me at 2 a.m. to ask if they could go to McDonald's. I was like, really? You don't need to call me for that. Okay. So EIDL technologies are constantly changing. It's ridiculous how quickly these types of things are becoming so mainstream. So your best bet to find all the current applications that are available out there is actually to do web searches and check YouTube, and just some quick little search things, YouTube, disability, home controls, those are some different search criteria that you can use. Okay. All right, so we are going to go to the test, but while I'm getting that, any questions on any of this stuff? That was a pretty quick overview. Okay. And for those of you who have been having issues with accessing the test, I was in a community for go-to training asking why, and other people have had these issues, but they said make sure all of your OSs are up to date with all of your, those updates that get run, your browser is up to date, and make sure your JavaScript is installed and up to date. And those seem to be the big things. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch the test. And let me know if you can see it. All right, so some people can see it, some people can't. So for those who can't, yeah, it's definitely, it seems to be something specific to your computer, and it could be the browser, it could be the JavaScript is not up to date. Um, so there's a couple things with the system that need to be checked. But I think this is the last class where we're doing tests. So all right, so we're at 71%. If we can get, once we get to, I think, 80%, I will go ahead and close the test. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the test so we can review it. All right, everybody see the results?
It's good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the first one, um, so assistive technologies that control devices within the environment are defined as, okay, it's supposed to be electronic aids to daily living, so the EADLs, okay? So I'm not sure why we only had 71% answer this correctly. So ECUs and ECSs, those are the old terms. So C and D can be, I guess, a little confusing because it's environmental aids, because it is controlling the environment, or electronic aids for daily living. So just remember, we're looking at electronic, so remote control, switches, to activate electronics within our environment, and that should help you remember the name of it. Next one, you guys did really well. I'm going to give you a hint to remember this. I'm using limited output EADLs to control a switch toy, provides intermittent switch control, which can be used to develop what skills, and it's going to be cause and effect. Okay. Obviously, we're not doing mobility or motor, and scanning options might be a little confusing since it talks about switches, but it's going to be cause and effect, turning the toy on and off. And then the other one is, which technology uses house wiring for transmission? So of these four options, X10 would be the correct answer, because Bluetooth obviously is not using any wiring. Radio frequency is not using any direct wiring to operate. And then infrared, obviously, like a remote control. Yeah, the environmental versus electronic, those two next to each other, that is going to catch you. So just take your time when you're looking at that type of question. Okay, so any questions on EADLs?
I just had one comment. The person signed in as 1111 says he knew the topic was EADLs, but back to
Yep.
what we talked about, read the question. I think
Yep.
that was a good kind of cue for prepping for the exam, because I'm a fast reader and I probably would have jumped over those words.
Yep.
But
Yeah, because it's
I
because
don't
the
know.
environmental was first and electronic was second. So you see
Right.
environmental, you pick that one real quick because, oh, we're in, it's an environmental control. So yeah, that's going to be one of those tricky ones where you have to slow down and really read through it. So okay, so if there's no other questions on EADLs, we will take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back and do sensory, which is vision and hearing. So 8:30 is when we will get started back with that. Okay, so we have about 2 minutes left in our break. Okay, so it is 8:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to be doing sensory technology. So 2 important senses, hearing and vision. And we're going to start with hearing. All right, so we're going to be looking at the most common personal needs produced by deafness or being hard of hearing, the most appropriate technologies for people who are deaf, as well as the most appropriate technologies for people who are hearing impaired. And then we'll also be looking at vision loss or blindness and all of those as well. All right, so first is hearing technologies. So this is basically, a who and a what for the evaluation process. So who do we need to have involved? We need to have an audiologist and an ENT. And what are we looking at? We're looking at thresholds and the nature of the impairment. So for auditory, we're looking at the amplitude and the frequency. And then for the nature of the impairment, is it progressive or is it non-progressive? So when we look at the amplitude, right, of different sounds, can everybody hear me? Okay. So it looks like some maybe can, some can't. Okay, you guys are all hearing me. Okay. 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 So when we look at amplitude, let me just let Teresa know because she lost me. She lost me. Okay. So amplitude. When we look at the different decibel levels, conversational speech is rated between 40 and 80 decibels. Okay. And here's a bunch of really other cool ones to look about, like a whisper, it's about 10. A watch ticking is 20. Car horn 100. Then we go down to like a jackhammer and a jet taking off. And I like the stereo speakers, or if you think about like a concert, that's just like, crazy loud. Anything rated above 80 decibels, if heard for prolonged periods, can cause permanent damage to your hearing because it's actually damaging the hairs in the cochlea. Okay. So then when we look at frequency, okay, the frequency is in hertz and amplitude is in decibels. frequency, so the lowest, so just to look at lowest piano key versus highest piano key goes from 27 hertz to 4,000 hertz, and normal hearing can, on conversational speech, fall in between there. So normal hearing, you're going to be 20 to 20,000 hertz, and conversational speech falls between 250 and 4,000 hertz. Okay, so that's frequency is the actual like low versus high, sound. So think about like the piano. Okay, and amplitude is the volume. Okay, so goals of hearing technology, obviously communication, and we're going to be talking about all of these in a little more detail, but we're looking to improve social interaction, speech articulation, personal communication skills, and being able to access specific information, as well as having alternative feedback and improve safety. Okay. So lots of different technologies for deafness and hearing impairments. Okay. So for deafness, we have technologies for personal communication, right? So interpreter, sign language, lip reading. Okay, so low tech thinking, fax machines, which we don't really use too much anymore. Telephone, so we have TDD or TTY, telecommunications services. We have relay operators. We can use the internet now for all kinds of communication. There's cochlear implants and there's texting. Okay. All right. So let's talk about interpreter, sign language, and lip reading. Okay. So these are where we're using person-to-person communication. We can get interpreters to help us mostly with sign language. Somebody who is deaf tends to do a lot of lip reading, so we need to make sure that we're facing them and they can see our lips. But these are technologies, right? These are assistive technologies. So just more low tech, okay? And then we have telephones or telecommunication devices, right? Texting phones. So, these are systems that are out there. These systems are still used today. However, with our smartphones and texting being so common, right? We really don't need these more sophisticated devices. So telecommunications relay services, or TRS, provides a bridge for telephone calls between voice telephone users and people who are deaf or hard of hearing or even speech disabled. TRS is mandated by the ADA, so the Americans with Disabilities Act, and is regulated by the FCC. There have been many new improvements in TRS in the last several years, and these improvements give users choices that make TRS calls more natural and functionally equivalent to voice telephone communications. You have 711 access, which is when any caller in the US can access relay services simply by dialing 711. There are also more choices for text communication. There's relay services that can handle calls from traditional TTYs. You have TTYs with turbo code. You've got computer modems as well as internet, so IP relay. And then you have video relay services. So using high-speed internet connection, or ISDN, a video connection is established, and a qualified sign language interpreter relays the conversation with the voice telephone party. And then you have Spanish relay services as well. So Spanish language calls can be handled by the relay service, which is nice. And then you have speech-to-speech services, where a hearing person with a speech disability may use TRS for repeating his or her speech to the other party in the telephone call. In addition, several services exist for people who want to use the text in one direction and speech in the other. So you have voice carryover, and this is the deaf or hard of hearing person speaks for expressive communication and reads the transcription by the operator for the receptive part of the conversation. You have hearing carryover. This is where the hearing person with a speech disabilities types for expressive communication and listens to the other party for the receptive part of the communication. You also have things like CapTel or captioned telephone. And this is a newer product. Not so new. I would say not so new anymore, actually. It's by Ultra Service, in which the operators repeat the words of the hearing party into an automatic speech recognition system for rapid transcription, and then voice and data carried on one line so that the hard of hearing or deaf user can monitor the speech as well as see the transcription. The CapTel phone is set up for dial through so that the user does not need to dial the relay service first. Okay. And then what we have now, actually some people were saying that they couldn't hear me, but some people are hearing me now. Okay. And then we have a comment here. Saying that I was just in Europe for 3 weeks and hearing impaired use Snapchat and sign. Yep. I never realized how many hearing impaired people are in the population until so many people are signing on the bus at the cafe. And I asked a few people about TTY and they laughed and indicated all gone. One guy said Stone Age. Yeah, it really is not as common nowadays, especially with all of our smartphones. And this is, really becoming more commonplace. With the smartphones, you have the internet, you have, all these different text messaging options. You also have like FaceTime, on the Apple OS systems. So, you could actually do sign language through FaceTime. So that's pretty cool. But, it's still, the TTY systems still have their place with some of our populations.
Hey, Heather, I'm back. It's Teresa.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
use the TTY a lot in the hospital. So you think for like medical appointments and stuff, it's still
Oh
the
yeah.
go-to,
Yeah.
but it's more
Oh
socializing.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's still being used, absolutely, in a lot of environments, but with smartphones, it's going to become. I wouldn't say it's going to become obsolete anytime soon, but it's not as commonplace, I think, in some of the homes nowadays. So. Um, And as Beth said, although TTY can be used if someone doesn't have a smartphone, right? Only a landline. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if they don't have a smartphone, because we definitely have populations that are not using smartphones, they're still going to be using their landlines and they're still going to need the TTY option. So yeah, it's not going to be going away anytime soon. We're just not going to see it as often. Okay, through internet, we can use video chat. And, we have our built-in cameras, our webcams, right, in our on our computers, on our smartphones, right? We can also use programs like, Skype and Zoom to do all this. And, Zoom's free, so we can do all this kind of cool stuff through the internet nowadays. All right, so let's talk about cochlear implants real quick. So cochlear implant, it's small, it's very complex electronic device. It can help provide a sense of sound to a person who is profoundly deaf or severely hard of hearing. The implant consists of an external portion that sits behind the ear and a second portion that is surgically placed under the skin. And it has a microphone which picks up sound from the environment. It has a speech processor, which selects and arranges sounds picked up by the microphone. There's a transmitter and a receiver or stimulator, which receives signals from the speech processor and converts them into electrical impulses. And then you have an electrode array, which is a group of electrodes that collects all of those impulses from the stimulator and sends them to different regions of the auditory nerve. So pretty complex little device. It does not restore normal hearing, but it can give a deaf person a useful representation of sounds in the environment and help them to understand speech. We also have closed captioning, which allows us access to audio information. Now you have this built into your TVs. You can use, there's apps, right? Also for closed captioning. I think live caption is one, Ava is another. YouTube has captioning. You can add your own captioning to videos. Microsoft has a live captioning option for events that can actually caption on the big projector, or it can be through somebody's computer or their phone. Google Slides has live captioning as you're presenting. It will, and you use a microphone, it'll caption everything that the presenter is saying. So it's all kinds of different captioning options nowadays. And that here's an example of that computer-aided real-time captioning. Then Microsoft has a good one, but then you also have CART, which is computer-assisted real-time translation. This is another big one that's out there. And this is when there's a captioner, so somebody who is actually gathering the audio and transcribing it. So a lot of times they are a trained court reporter or stenographer, and they use a stenotype machine with a phonetic keyboard and special software. And then the computer translates those phonetic symbols into captions and displays them either on that large display or on a laptop. And a lot of the computer systems, so like Microsoft and Google, it's all built in, so you don't need that stenographer. Typically, there is a slight delay because of the captioners need to hear the information and type it. You have, again, the Microsoft and the Google. You just have to make sure that you have a microphone hooked up. So a lot of different ways that we can get captioning. Okay. And then we also have access to environmental sounds, okay? So if you think about, like, the fire alarms, right? So like I'm in a hotel tonight, and the fire alarms have the strobe light that's connected to them. So for automatic access, so if I can't hear it, I can see it. You also have audio to vibrating signals. So think about, how does a person who is deaf or hard of hearing hear an alarm clock? Well, they can use a vibrating alarm clock where it's a little sensor that goes like under the pillow typically, and when the alarm goes off, it vibrates the pillow. And then service dogs obviously are another option to provide that audio. Okay. And then let's talk quickly about hearing aids. So there are several types of hearing aids that can be used, anywhere from behind the ear to the invisible in the canal model. The type selected will be based on preference, age, fine motor control, right? Because, some are going to be more difficult to use than others. So like behind the ear is going to be the easiest to put on, and the invisible in the canal is going to be the most difficult because of the size of it, because it's so tiny. And kids, for example, typically will wear the behind the ear because of ease of use, ease of wearing, putting it on, taking it off, and also because that ear portion is easier to accommodate different ear shapes and sizes. And when they grow, it's an easier device to accommodate their growth. So for personal communication, there are many ways that individuals can use cell phones and hear within our environment, okay? So many hearing aid wearers still experience interference when they're trying to use a cell phone, okay? And particularly if they're using the telecoil for telephone communication, so like, the older telephones, but typically somebody with an in the ear or completely in the canal instrument hearing aid generally experience less interference than somebody who uses a behind the ear. And newer digital hearing aids are generally more immune to interference than older conventional analog hearing aids. In 2003, the FCC actually partially lifted the exemption to hearing aid compatibility requirements for digital wireless phones. And this allowed the phone industry to have a phase-in period for compliance for hearing aids. Okay. And for acoustic coupling to a hearing aid's microphone, the new rules require each digital phone manufacturer and carrier to have 2 commercially available handsets for each transmission technology with reduced RF emissions. Okay, and that should all be in place at this point. And for inductive coupling to a hearing aids coil, digital phone manufacturers and carriers were given some extra time to make available 2 handsets to provide telecoil coupling capabilities for each transmission technology they offer. And again, those should all be in place as well. It's important to understand that FCC does not authority over hearing aids, right? But this authority, although somewhat limited, lies with the FDA, okay, for hearing aids. So the two working together have been able to get the technology so that somebody using a hearing aid is able to use the phone. Okay. Okay. So here is a large area assistive listening device, and it's an induction loop amplification. FDA is the Food and Drug Administration, Aldrich. So an induction loop or hearing loop system transmits an audio signal directly into a hearing aid through a magnetic field. And this greatly reduces background noise, competing sounds, reverberation, and other acoustic distortions that reduce the clarity of sound. An infrared hearing system is a popular alternative to an induction loop system, and a typical system consists of an audio source, an infrared transmitter, and an infrared listening receiver. Okay, and these are typically FM systems, which is frequency modulation. That's what FM stands for. And the person with a hearing aid or hearing loss, somebody with a hearing loss, wears the receiver portion of the FM system. And typically the range of these personal systems is about 50 feet. And often the receiver is integrated into the wearer. It can be integrated to a hearing aid. It can be integrated into a cochlear implant, and the signal is delivered directly through those hearing devices. You can also just use, headphones with them as well. So if somebody doesn't have a hearing aid, right, or a hearing or like a cochlear implant, you would just use like headphones or something for the FN systems. So any questions on the hearing portion? Aldrich just said there are new digital ones that sometimes you have to shut them off because kids can eavesdrop. Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's amazing what kids have figured out that they can do. All right, so any questions on the hearing? Okay, so if not, we're going to go ahead and move on to vision. Okay. Okay. All right, so for vision, sign language apps, there are a ton of sign language apps out there now. Also, I don't know if you guys know, for anybody who's using Microsoft, actually, they have a deaf and hard of hearing support. So it's a sign language support. So you can actually communicate through sign language with some of their support techs that know sign language, and it's pretty cool. So you can communicate and kind of have your computer fixed through, going through all that stuff through sign language. Okay, so for vision technology, for the evaluation portion, we have a lot more people that are going to potentially be involved in evaluating for vision needs. So you have your 3 different types of doctors: optician, optometrist, or ophthalmologist. You've got a neuro-ophthalmologist or developmental ophthalmologist. You've got OTs are going to be involved as well, and then mobility trainers. So if you are blind, you're going to need a mobility trainer. And what they're looking for is the visual acuity, the visual field, their tracking abilities, their scanning abilities, their overall function and perception, as well as orientation and mobility skills. So first, let's look visual acuity. Okay, this is where we're looking at, the size of the objects, right? The contrast of the objects, and then the pattern frequency. So, anybody who goes to the eye doctor and has glasses or contacts, this is a visual acuity issue. So we need to know, like, where is their visual acuity? Like, is it, 2015, which is, where my kids are, which I'm very jealous. Is it maybe 2800? Is it worse than that? 2000? There's all different kinds of, visual acuity. And then we're also looking at ocular motor control impairment. So we're looking at tracking and scanning abilities. Disjunctive eye movements is when the eyes do not work in unison and move, and they don't move in the same direction. And then you've got diplopia, which is double vision. The problems that we encounter with a visual impairment is obviously access to information that's in our environment, um, orientation and mobility, so the distance between objects, so that depth perception, determining a position in space, and navigation between locations. And obviously activities of daily living and recreation are problem areas. So we want to provide access to information and reading. We want to enhance writing ability, independence for orientation and mobility, independence for daily activity, daily living activities, as well as participation in recreational activity. So these are our goals and our tasks with our assistive technology. Okay. So different strategies for compensation for vision. So to enhance visual acuity, we're going to enlarge. We're going to increase illumination, so increase the lighting, and we're going to increase the contrast. So when we talked about computer access, we talked about high contrast, where we're flipping, instead of black on white, we're going to potentially do white on black, or black on yellow, or even yellow on blue. We also want to improve visual control. So we want to potentially reduce the speed of something, reduce the depth of the field. We want a large target size, and maybe we're looking at glasses with prism lenses or a patch. So for example, my youngest, who's he's now 15, but he has visual dyslexia, and he originally started with glasses that had a prism effect that allowed his eyes to converge and focus for reading. And he no longer needs that. It's because visual dyslexia is an issue with fine motor control in your eyes, and he no longer needs that, but he still wears glasses because it helps his eyes from getting fatigued, because as soon as his eyes become fatigued, then he has a hard time reading. And I'll just saying, when do you know certain contrasts are appropriate, especially in state testing? So the contrast is going to be user specific. It's a user preference, and you need to do a lot of trial and error with the different contrasts, because somebody might like white on black, whereas another person black on yellow or yellow on black is easier for them to see. So it really is trial and error to find which contrast is best for the person. All right, so some different technologies for somebody who is blind. You obviously, for reading, you have audio, right? Lots of audio books. You have Braille. There's different, they have specialized reading machines. So we have a lot of audiobooks nowadays. We've got screen readers, but they have actual like portable reading machines that also incorporate specific functionality, where there's navigation through menus and the buttons. So it does more for us. And then we've got OCR, or optical character recognition, and screen readers. Okay. So OCR, optical character recognition, this is when we're taking a document, we're scanning it in, and it's a software piece that, so when let's think about this. So when you scan in a document into a computer, what format does that document typically go into? So like file format. Right, a PDF or a JPEG, okay? And a screen reader, like let's just take a JPEG, for example. Is a screen reader going to be able to read the text if the document was scanned in as a JPEG? And the answer is no, it cannot read that. So what it's going to do, the optical character recognition takes that scanned document and converts it into a format that that screen reader can use, okay? So almost like a like a typical word processing document. Adobe Read, Adobe can, I believe there's versions of Adobe that do have the built-in text-to-speech capability. Optical character recognition is typically built in to a lot of different softwares now, so it's not like a separate piece that we need to add on. It's built into so many different things, like Google Docs even has like OCR built into it. Yep, Cami does it. Text Helps Read and Write has it built in. Kurzweil has it built in. Don Johnson's like Snap and Read has it built in. So most of those programs have OCR built directly into the systems now, and we don't have to worry about purchasing them separately. Now for writing, the technologies that we're going to be looking at are going to be computer-based Braille embossers and portable Braille note takers. I think there's some slides on some of those here coming up. So for cell phone use, there's different access features that are available. We have comprehensive voice output of information on the visual display. We've got audio alerts, right? And we talked about like even on the computer, we have audio alerts that we can do. You have voice control capabilities. And then you have specific display accessibility options for somebody who has low vision. So, you can zoom, you can enlarge, you can do that high contrast. Those are all available. Audio obviously is a huge one for somebody who is blind, and just, on your phone, there's so many different audio options that are available for the accessibility. Braille, and I know some people say, Braille is not as common as it used to be, but we're still teaching Braille. People are still using Braille, so it's still out there. Who has seen the new Uno cards that have Braille on them? Those are pretty cool. This is an embosser. They're printers where they print the Braille format. They are smaller. They're now Wi-Fi enabled, a lot quieter than they used to be. They used to be extremely loud. And this is an example of a refreshable Braille note taker. So you can see in that picture there where he has his fingers down bottom there, that's the refreshable Braille. So that is that's where he reads a document, and it refreshes the Braille across it as it's reading through the document. So think about like text to speech, but it's text to Braille. And then above his fingers, you see there's like 4 buttons on either side. That is your Braille keyboard. So think about like when we talked about like the BAT keyboard, the corded, right? The chording keyboard, where you're doing key combinations, like a chord on when you play a chord on a piano, it's that same concept where he's doing different key combinations in order to type. And then you have the other picture there is just a voice activated organizer. So you can just, use your voice to do different commands and record different things on there. Actually, when I worked at the University of Washington, and I worked for their Tech Act grant, but I also worked with the hospital out there, and the lady that was in charge of the office there. She wasn't my direct boss, but she was in charge of the office there. And she used a refreshable braille keyboard with a screen reader. So she used JAWS, if anybody's ever heard of JAWS. So it's a screen reader, and she would read her emails in the morning, and she had that speed so fast that I could not understand a word of it. But she was just so used to it. And she was able to read through her emails so quickly. There are a lot of electronic reading applications that are out there where you can literally just take a picture of it. It has the OCR built into it, and then upload it into like Google Docs, and then use or into like Microsoft Word, and then you can use different screen readers. Okay, and it's amazing the technologies that's out there. So you have like Text Helps Snap Further, you've got Don Johnson's Snap and Read, where you literally just take a picture, and then there's scanning applications, apps on your phone where you can take a picture of it, and it's like a scanner. So all kinds of cool apps out there that we can use. And then the picture on the right, there's a lot of that's another version of a refreshable Braille keyboard. And for writing, obviously we have our computer-based applications. We have text-to-speech output, so it's reading the documents. Screen readers will read everything on there. And then alt text or alternative text is extremely important. Does anybody know why alt text is important and what it's used for? Right, it's for photos and the description of it, because as a screen reader is going through a document, if there are pictures in it, that screen reader is not going to know what the picture is unless it has alt text associated with it. So it can read the description of the picture to the person who's using the screen reader. Web accessibility is also very important. Because the technology needs to be able to access those websites, right? So screen readers need to be able to access the fonts that are out there, those pictures that are out there, the layout of the web pages. You have special browsers that are available, but then you also have screen magnification built into them, and obviously you have your alt text. So web accessibility is very crucial. And you have specific web design label, so that alt text, and this is where the images of the text versus the text come into play. Labeling is extremely important, and then it also helps to minimize the Java and the JavaScript, which can interfere with some of these software programs. All right, so for orientation and mobility, you have, for example, long canes that help somebody find obstacles that are in front of them. You have guide dogs that'll help the person navigate and find obstacles and reroute them around obstacles. There's also some pretty cool travel aids that are out there. So you've got the electronic travel aid, and the purpose is to basically enhance your mobility and help you find locations, help you find obstacles. So some examples of electronic travel aids or ETAs. There's the laser cane, there's the weed walk, there's the Sunu band, right? And they all detect obstacles using sonar or ultrasonic waves, and then they vibrate when there's an obstacle that's being encountered. So they typically work in conjunction with a cane. So the long cane is finding obstacles that are in front of them on the ground, whereas like the We Walk and Sunu band specifically find obstacles basically from like the waist up. Okay, so you then have everything covered, so you're not running into obstacles. And then you have accessible signage. Obviously, we see this everywhere now because of the ADA. You see Braille on signs in the buildings, in the elevators, right? Everywhere you go, you're seeing the Braille associated on the signs. We also have GPSs and talking compasses, but there's also talking GPSs. If you think about like your phone, your smartphone GPS or the other GPS system you have in your car, it talks to you, right? So you have that capability, for example, on a smartphone, where somebody who is blind can use the talking GPS. And there's all kinds of different apps out there, some really cool things going on with them. And then you have recreation for people who are blind. There's, the beeper ball, right? You've got tons of different Braille options out there. You've got large print options out there, large print cards, obviously the Uno cards that we talked about with the Braille, all different kinds of recreational assistive technology as well. And then we have activities for daily living options. So there are actually, talking appliances out there. There's talking clocks and there's talking watches. There's scales and thermometers and toasters and all kinds of cool things that talk. You have Velcro and bump-ons. So bump-ons are those clear dots that you can use on the bottom of like vases or different ceramic knickknacks, right? So that they don't, those little bumpers. So like if you have something that might scratch a surface of furniture, right? Or to prevent something from sliding or slipping, those little clear dots that you put on, you can actually use those to label appliances, remotes, keyboards, anything around the house or office to have as the tactile marking on there. Okay. And then this picture on the right is with the little red, that's actually a liquid level indicator, which is pretty cool. So it tells you when the liquid is getting close to the top of the cup. And Aldrich said that there are Braille is a Braille version of Cards Against Humanity. That is awesome. That is a great card game. All right, so for low vision, for reading, we're going to be looking at large print materials, which I don't know if you guys have been in the store and you've seen the large print materials that are available. I know at one point when I would go into a store, I could get large print greeting cards, large print books. You can, a lot of times at the libraries, you can get large print books. You can get optical magnifiers. Now, they can be handheld magnifiers or larger magnifiers. You've got high illumination lamps, and then obviously you've got the closed circuit televisions, those CCTVs, where it has a camera and you put your document or your item under it. The camera then puts the image onto the little TV screen, and then you can magnify that. So that's a closed circuit television. For writing, we're looking at increasing that illumination. So increasing the lighting, we're looking at contrast. So again, that high contrast that we've talked about. And then obviously there's a lot of options through the computer with screen magnification and different things like that. For orientation and mobility for low vision, monoculars and binoculars can be used, cameras because we can zoom, right? Flashlights because it helps with illuminating, and even night vision goggles can actually be used as well. So all kinds of cool things. And for low vision for daily living and recreation, obviously just increasing lighting again. You've got large characters, labels, so just increased font sizes, and that includes books and magazines and games. And then obviously just using magnifiers while you're playing with some standard, daily living or recreational items. And this is pretty cool. There's a bill reader. So if you can't read the denomination, you just put the bill reader on there and it'll tell you what it is. And then the other one's a barcode reader. And there's a lot of different barcode readers out there. There's even apps for your phone that will do this, where you scan the barcode on maybe a food item, for example. So, the person with low vision or blindness knows, this is maybe a can of green beans and it's not a can of chili, right? Because if I want green beans with dinner and not chili, then I need to know what that can is. Tons and tons of apps out there where you can just use your smartphone with the camera and it will read the barcode and tell you what it is. Okay, so any questions before we move on to our test? Yes, Braille label makers are really cool, Michael. There's a lot of different versions. There's handheld manual ones, and then there's electronic ones, like the Braille label maker by Logan Tech, where you can use the built-in Braille keyboard or an external keyboard if you don't, know how to use a Braille keyboard. And then you can make Braille labels to label everything in your house, around your office, as well as using them to actually teach Braille as well. Okay, so any other questions before I launch the test? And for those of you who haven't been able to see the test, there's the questions right there for you. There are now, yes, George, there are Braille Legos. Legos has recently released Braille Legos. So, I mean, we have so many cool things coming out with Braille nowadays. It's pretty neat. I'm going to go ahead and launch the test. For video games, that's a good question. I know they're doing a lot of accessibility, Eldritch, with switches and the adapters, but for low vision and blindness, that's a good question. I'm not sure exactly what's out there at the moment. But with Microsoft and all they're doing with the gaming piece, they have to have something going on with like the Xbox. That's a good question.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything either. I'll have to look into
Yeah,
that.
I haven't seen it yet.
I've just seen all the switches.
Yeah. Yes, lots of different switches to play the video games. But yeah, for low vision and blindness, I'm not sure what's out there yet. But if there's nothing, it's going to be coming soon. Yes, George, do you know of any video games for people with vision impairments with the auditory? You're going to look it up. Perfect. Remember this test, all three questions they're saying accept. So make sure you read through those. Oh, there you go. George just put a link up for you guys for video games. Yeah, Fidelis, yeah, if you can't see the first one, you're not gonna be able to see the second one. Again, it's gonna be something with your browser, your operating system, or your JavaScript. Yeah, don't you love Google? It's amazing what we can find on Google. Yeah, that would be interesting, George, to see how that is with the YouTube. All right, we're at almost 70% submitted for the test, so we're gonna try and get to 80, and then we'll review it. All right, so we're almost there. We go. I think we're at 82% now. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to close out. I'm going to close out the test and we're going to review it. Okay, can everybody see the answers here?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. All right, so you guys did really well on this one. So the first one, the most common personal needs for assistive technology by individuals with hearing impairment of deafness include all the following except. And the one that was correct was devices to improve memory and retention. So if I have a hearing impairment or deafness, I'm not going to be looking at improving memory and retention. I'm looking at safety, auditory, access to auditory information, and improved social communication. And the next one, appropriate technologies for individuals with hearing impairment or deafness include all of the following except computer screen reader software. So again, because we're looking at hearing impairment or deafness, we don't want a screen reader. We're looking at visual, right? So visual things, so visual signaling, text messaging, and captioning, all visual. And then number 3, appropriate technologies for individuals with low vision or blindness include all the following except. So we didn't do quite as well on this one. So except audio amplification to aid recall and retention for verbal instructions. Again, we're looking, it's saying aiding recall and retention. That's not our main purpose of looking at assistive technologies for low vision and blindness. We're looking at screen readers. So anything auditory, right? Navigation aids and audio translation. So for hearing, we're looking for visual. For visual, we're looking for hearing, right? To accommodate those. Okay. So any questions on the hearing or the vision? I'm going to pull up something else here. Maybe computer's being funky. I want to share a different document here. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so in your materials, there is a case studies breakout session. Okay. And there is in that, and can everybody see the Word document?
Yep, I could see it. Looks like they can see it.
Okay. Yep, perfect. Okay. So you need to pull in, whoa, way too much. There are 4 videos here. Okay. You are going to watch those videos between now and Thursday. Okay. And then on Thursday, we're going to do case studies. Okay, so these are the 4 case studies. So we're going to be looking at AAC, computer access, environmental or electronic aids for daily living, and then seating and wheelchair mobility. Okay, you're going to watch the videos about the person, and then in this document, scroll down here. So there's a description of him, and then there's specific questions. So we want you to read the video or watch the video, and then just kind of read through these questions and have an idea of how you would answer these things. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk through all of this, and we're going to have discussions with you guys, and you can chat, you can, unmute yourself, and we're going to have some nice interactive discussions about the different case studies. So any questions on that piece?
Thanks,
And do you
Heather.
have
I just
homework?
wanted to clarify.
Welcome.
If you go back to the top of it,
Yep.
yeah, George, that's what I was going to talk about. We're just going to do this as one group. If you can go to that first page Yeah, that instructions, don't pay attention to that. We're not going to work
Yeah.
separately. The way this platform GoToTraining is set up, it's hard to do like multiple different people at once. We found it works better if just as a group we can talk through them. So we'll go through as a whole group the AAC case study, then we'll do the computer access, the EADLs. If you could look at the videos ahead of time, it's going to be more efficient. For us to stop in the middle and all watch it together will just make this a really long session and we won't have as much dialogue. Um, so don't pay attention to those instructions, and we're just going to kind of do it live. Does that make sense?
Yep. So if you look in your materials, there's questions about where to find this. If you look in the materials tab in your tools over here for GoToTraining, it's at the very bottom. It's a Word document called Case Studies Breakout Session. That's correct, George. We would like for you guys to watch the videos, ahead of time, and then we will just be discussing the case studies during Thursday's class. Okay, so again, it's the Word document that's in your materials.
And so I think that'll take about an hour. And then for the second half, we'll go over kind of test taking. There's some group questions that we can read through together and come up with a solution. And then like we'll go over some strategies and do some final housekeeping. And then after Thursday, we'll be finished. And so then that's when you'll get your survey and then your exam. And we'll go back through and repost those questions from the beginning just so you know what next steps are.
All right, so if there are no other questions, we are actually done a little bit early tonight. So enjoy your extra 5 minutes. For the phone call in 1111, you don't need to submit anything to us in writing unless you want to, so that we can take a look at it. It does not impact your ability to get CEUs. Your final exam that will be sent by Charlie that you'll have to take is how you get your CEUs. But it's just good practice to go through the case studies just to get ready for the exam. So Michael, you asked if you have a Mac in the Word document. The links to the videos are in the Word document if you can find that. It's in the materials section for your thinker. Olga, I believe the final exam is available immediately. I think you get Teresa, I don't know if you know, I'm pretty sure you get an email immediately after your exam, email with the final exam for the course in order to take that to practice and get your CEUs.
Oops, I'll pull the slides
then,
from the first class because it outlines it.
okay. Yeah, so we can take a look at all of this stuff again for everybody who's asking specifically about the classes and the video, the recording sessions and all that stuff. We can take a look at that again on Thursday. Teresa, about the number of days you have to complete the test. I do not remember. Teresa, do you remember how many days?
Let me go ahead and pull that up since
Okay.
we're having questions.
Give
me 1 second.
I will,
go to, whoops, that was the wrong one.
Stephanie, how are you? You can email me directly and we can talk about that student if you want. Because text to speech is going to be reading. Trying to think what program will be good for him. I don't know if you've tried Text Helps Read and Write. But then there's also like Screen Nova. Dolphin has some stuff that might.
Can I grab the presentation and I'll
Yep,
share
go
my
ahead.
screen? I don't know how
Yep.
to do that. Change presenter. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
Not yet.
Oh, wait. I have to share it. Make another. Show my screen. Oh, change presenter. I have to make, or I'm Charlie too, and then show my screen. Can you guys see me now?
Yep, there we go.
Yeah. So here, I think this answers most of your questions. So to receive the 1.4 CEUs, obviously present after the course, so you will successfully pass a quiz based on the course's learning outcomes. So all of these exams that we've done at the end of each one is pretty much a summary of the test. So there's 28 multiple choice questions. You have to answer 20 to correctly pass. If you don't pass, wait 2 days before doing the quiz again. You have to do an evaluation to give a survey about the course and instructors. And then within 2 weeks of passing the quiz and completing the eval, Resna will email your CEU transcript. So did that answer those questions?
I think the only other question was how long do they have once they receive the link? Pretty sure it's in that email. I'm trying to remember what it is. Let's see if I can.
How long do they have to complete it?
Yeah. I'm gonna see if I can find that.
Yeah, this is the slide. We'll definitely find out by next week.
You know what? I just found it when he sent this out. I'm not seeing a timeline for it. So yeah, he didn't put that timeline in that email
So how many
actually.
days do we have to complete the test?
Right. Yeah,
I'll go
that's
ahead and email. I'll
yeah. I
email
think we
him and
need that
find that
answer
out.
from him. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So anything else before we sign off?
Yeah, Michelle's asking about how long the recordings are available. 60 days from the last session or 60 days after each individual session. I'm thinking it's 60 days after each individual session.
I think so too. I'll ask him.
Raquel, I I don't know if it's exactly the same quiz, but it might be. Yeah. This one, though, has a unique code for you in order to get your CEUs. So Michelle, we don't form groups for the case studies. We're going to do it as one big group, so ignore those instructions that are on that document. You'll just watch the videos before Thursday, and then we, as a large group, we will be discussing those.
Okay, I think you're ready to sign off. I'll stop the recording. Heather, you good?